I got to where I am today through violence. I'm thankful for it.
A man from Dagestan, Russia stands atop his sport. Peerless, dominant. He's traveled halfway across the globe in order to see what tests the warriors of the rest of the world have to offer. In doing so, he's put Sambo on the map, and more specifically Dagestan, at least those who are paying attention. While he stepped away from a sport far before we would have liked him to, the legacy he left as a teacher would echo throughout combat sports. Oh, you thought I meant him? My bad. Before there was the eagle, there was the wolf. Dagestan, Russia, is a small constituent republic of the Russian Federation nestled in the Caucasus Mountains, directly bordering Georgia, Azerbaijan, and Chechnya. Those who follow modern MMA are no doubt familiar with the country and its athletes, but for the sake of those viewers who only follow the noble sport of pro wrestling, allow me, a literal published historian, no really, to introduce you to the Enoki Friendship Island principle in action. Dagestan is home to a diverse population of various mountain peoples, and almost all are Muslim, a minority in the overall Russian population that's historically faced systematic oppression by ethnic Russians. What the region is most known for is its wildly disproportionate production of top-level athletes, from Olympic wrestlers, to MMA fighters, to Sambo champions, and hell, even a few boxers like former world champion archer Beterbiev. What's most fascinating to me about the country from a geopolitical/sociological perspective is how peaceful the region is, with the second highest life expectancy of any place in Russia, and largely devoid of the violence you see in other places nearby like Chechnya. Interestingly, a factor commonly associated with the lack of Islamic extremist violence in the region is the incredibly pervasive presence of sports in the youth culture of Dagestan. The young men of the country are stepping on the wrestling mat as soon as they can walk, and channel whatever emotions they have into the sport. These young men have a positive, constructive passion in their lives, and thus are far less likely to fall into the violent fundamentalism that's present in similar regions. In all honesty, it's kind of fucking beautiful. Sport here has in all likelihood saved countless lives, and that's to be commended on all fronts. It's an embodiment of the peace-brokering power of sport that Antonio Inoki believed in, and one I find inspiring as all hell. As much as it's a cliche, subsidizing youth centers amongst other vital programs is really fucking important to positively molding young people, not some superfluous cost funded, something all countries should remember. Cough cough, go fuck yourself Doge, cough cough. Volk Han is a product of the system, a Sambo practitioner of the highest order, a top-level MMA athlete in his time period, like his student Fyodor Emelianenko would be, and a damn good pro wrestler for as long as he chose to grace the squared circle with his presence. He served in the Soviet military during their war in Afghanistan, a conflict you might remember from Metal Gear Solid 5, or that Rambo movie where he trained Osama bin Laden. Jokes aside, it was brutal and sad, with Han remarking what a shame the conflict was. Sambo was his way to bigger things, however, with him joining a top team and winning several championships. Finally, in 1991, he was scouted by excellent pro wrestler and alleged mixed martial artist Akira Maeda to participate in his new shoot-style promotion. He was almost immediately one of, if not the best wrestler in the promotion, with pro wrestling coming naturally to him, especially the Fighting Network ring style, which pretty much just had two guys go out there and shoot until they reached the planned finish. Han's genius was largely unmatched, and instrumental in introducing Sambo to the wider world of sports. To present a rival worthy of his skills, rings had to produce an unmatched catch wrestler, and so they fielded Kiyoshi Tamura. The following section was written by Control, the man behind the Kick Submission Suplex YouTube channel, which hosts many classic shoot-style matches. Please show him some love by subscribing to his channel if you haven't already. Thank you. Once-in-a-generation athletes don't come around often, but in wrestling, they sometimes come in bunches. During the 1990s, a litany of prodigious grapplers were birthed by the Japanese wrestling scene. Chief among them were Kazushi Sakuraba, Tsuyoshi Kosaka, aka TK, and of course, Kiyoshi Tamura. Tamura came through the UWF dojo in the late 1980s. Unassuming at first, the lanky Tamura lacked size and muscle. Surprisingly, he was someone who had a sumo background. It didn't take long, however, for Tamura to become a super rookie, despite a long injury layoff in 1990. Kiyoshi Tamura came back just in time for the final days of the UWF and cemented himself as can't-miss talent before the catastrophic implosion of the UWF. The collapse of the UWF planted seeds for the frenzied evolution of Kakutogi throughout the new decade. Tamura would follow Nobuhiko Takada and several other wrestlers to one of these planted seeds, UWFI, which postured itself as the clear successor to the UWF. Tamura's time in the UWFI was not straightforward. For a variety of reasons, Tamura never broke through as a true main event star. Nobuhiko Takada was by far the most important name to UWFI, and he had to keep himself as a standard bearer to keep the cash flowing. Takada also chose to focus on programs with monster foreigners, including Gary Albright and Vader. Thus, native talents were rarely elevated. Regardless, Tamura found ways to grow as a wrestler through his training with Billy Robinson and Lou Thez. Lou Thez took such a liking to Tamura that he invited him to train in his home in Virginia. The UWFI dojo also had the benefits of having some of the best Muay Thai fighters in the world providing striking lessons, and Tamura was a beneficiary of this. Tamura came back from his training to win an infamous shoot fight against Matthew Saad Muhammad, a boxer who was former WBC light heavyweight champion. Muhammad stood no chance, and Tamura put him away easily with a rear naked choke. People saw that Tamura was for real, but unfortunately he never got the chance to help carry the promotion. It's a shame because Tamura was obviously better than everyone else on the roster, perhaps say Kazushi Sakuraba. It was also evident that Tamura was forcing everyone to catch up to him as a wrestler. Even Takada had to work extra hard when he faced his student. Perhaps nothing sums this up better than the trilogy of matches Tamura had with Sakuraba before he departed from UWFI in May 1996. By this point, both Sakuraba and Tamura were light years ahead of everyone else on the UWFI roster. Sickened by UWFI's decision to work with New Japan and take jobs left and right, Tamura left the territory. Tamura's talent was undeniable, and a bidding war commenced between Pancrase and Rings to secure his services. In his infinite wisdom, and perhaps seeing bountiful opportunities to have great matches and become Akira Maeda's successor, Tamura chose to join Rings. In his first match with Dick Vre? Dutch is a fake language, it doesn't matter. In June 1996, it was already clear that Tamura would thrive in his new home. Despite the match's brevity, the intensity levels were off the charts, and not like anything Tamura had done in UWFI outside of a few exceptions. Tamura defeated the Dutch Cyborg, and the fans were immediately behind the aloof genius as he had become known. Tamura would face another Dutchman, Willie Peters, in an equally intense match the month after. After securing another victory, Tamura was booked against Maurice Smith in August 1996. Maurice Smith was becoming an early pioneer of modern MMA and would be essential to the Alliance, a training team formed alongside with Frank Shamrock and Tsuyoshi Kosaka. Smith proved to be formidable and even tested Tamura at times, but Tamura found a way. At 3-0, there was no point in delaying the inevitable. Everyone knew why Tamura came to Rings, to prove himself as the best in the world. The only way to do that was to face the Wolf. The match begins with each man displaying the demeanor you'd expect from them. The fiery young gun Tamura bouncing with anticipation, and the Iceman Han bearing an expression that looks more like he's at a particularly bad middle school talent show than a fist fight. Han claims the center of the ring as both test the waters, with Tamura light on his front foot in a classic Muay Thai stance you might recognize from Satoru Sayama's work. Each try to snatch each other's wrists, and then bang! Han snags a double wrist lock, his prodigious strength allowing him to carry Tamura away from the ropes before dumping him with a fucking suplex. Volk Han's suplex is God. It's at this point I'll have to dedicate time to Han's double wristlock suplex. It's equal parts impressive and terrifying as he deadlifts his opponent by just their wrists before throwing them. It's both a great power spot and also ties into the general flow of his grappling, as he often holds on to the double wrist lock upon going to the ground, opening up further attacks. It's the flashiest weapon in his arsenal, and absolutely beautiful as a throw. Far from helpless on the mat, however, Tamura offers defenses to early sub-attempts, and soon both are rolling around looking to get a good bite on an arm or leg in order to end this contest quickly. What's really great about this segment is that Han is very aware that Tamura is looking for the ropes. It's a pet peeve of mine when a wrestler is completely unaware of their ring positioning, leading to a rope break, but Tamura just barely makes it after twisting and bucking. Han catches a kick and tries to swing Tamura to the ground, but after pulling guard for a leg attack ends up surrendering top position. The Russian Wolf's armbar defense holds up, and the double wrist lock he snags out of his own half guard forces Tamura to burn another rope break. Kiyoshi is able to run the pipe, but once again the wrist lock proves to be a problem for him, as Han has an answer to whatever he tries to pull. Only when switching to a heel hook can he actually find a breach in Han's defenses, forcing him to burn his first rope break. Finally, Tamura brings his lethal kicks into play, with the southpaw body kicks crowding the Russian onto the ropes in order to rack up easy damage. Tamura is somewhat of an anomaly for pro-res MMA guys in that he's actually a very good striker, with his kicks in particular out of the southpaw stance being absolutely beautiful. Much respect from a fellow southpaw. This striking would hold up in later full-on shoots, knocking out Takada, okay, maybe that one isn't that impressive, and Minowa Man, as well as winning a decision over Kazushi Sakuraba. While he is able to land some great damage on Volk Han as the Russian shells up against the ropes, Han circles to his back and snags a rear naked choke, which earns the third rope break. Tamura is pissed off, probably mostly at himself, and responds in accordance with that, going for a half crab, then a positively brilliant transition to a Fujiwara armbar. Volk is far from defeat, and he defends the hold much like one would in omoplata by straightening out the arm in a direction perpendicular to the lock, and the two trade holds at a rapid pace, neither man definitively schooling the other, until Tamura commits a sin that doubtless in kayfabe earned him a beating from his catch wrestling colleagues backstage, trying to win via rear naked choke, and instead falling victim to a Sakuraba-style Kimura, which Han cranks until a fourth rope break is burned. Both men stand, and then oy vey, Tamura tries to teep a hole through Han via a kick to the stomach, abruptly dropping the man. As my co-host Walk mentioned on the Volk Han episode of our podcast Bachi Bachi Book Club, what you should absolutely listen to if you haven't already, Han is basically the wrestling equivalent of Charles Oliveira, a submission specialist who regularly gets dropped in striking exchanges and then shrugs it off, which Han does here, somehow still looking bored. Kiyoshi tries to capitalize by taking him down, and eventually secures another Fujiwara armbar, but Volk finds the ropes in one of my favorite all-time rope breaks, subtly just tapping the rope with his foot, just barely escaping certain defeat. Knowing he just needs to lay his cards on the table and go for broke, Han deploys his Homer Simpson tier boxing, marching forward in a sequence that I hope Sam will play in slow motion in order to capture its rich beauty, throwing hands like an alien who's had boxing described to them but has never actually seen a fight. He then hits one of the most savage and petty kick combos I've ever seen, first blasting the 27-year-old Phenom with a roundhouse to the head that staggers him, and just as he barely stays upright, kicks him in the back of the knee, which is as painful as it is embarrassing. Tamura attempts one final grappling exchange, but is caught in a Kimura and forced to tap. The young shooter with limitless potential has been definitively solved by the Russian Wolf, and with primarily a double wrist lock nonetheless. Time and time again, Tamura was able to secure an advantageous position before being caught, with Han using the Kimura in a very similar way to Sakuraba as aforementioned, cheekily catching it while from a seemingly bad spot like in the bottom of mount or side control. Han is quite simply older, wiser, and more seasoned. This man fought the Mujahideen, so comparatively this Japanese kid isn't exactly threatening to him. Just another day at the office. While he did the job to Akira Maeda in the beginning of his tenure in rings because Maeda is gonna Maeda, Volk is unofficially the real top dog of this promotion. And in order to topple the Lord of Rings, Tamura is going to need to level up. Unfortunately for him, he only has 4 months. The two meet for the second time in January of the following year, at the conclusion of the year's Rings Mega Battle Tournament. Each man has easily triumphed over competition, but Han in more impressive fashion, dispatching his opponents efficiently and lethally. Tamura is no joke either, but on average took a few minutes longer to solve his foes, with both mostly facing European transplants in the form of kickboxers and other Sambo practitioners. Before the match, a beautiful video package plays, with the footage of both men in talking head interviews as tensions build. More so than any other pro-res promotion, even amongst other shoot-style companies, this is a presentation of sport, not entertainment. Each man talks about their first match as well, and emphasizes the real competitive nature of the sport, by reiterating that they have been each training for this rematch. This is a game of strategy, not just a story. In a strange way, reminds me of Eddie Kingston, who always says before a big match that he studies his opponents. If pro wrestling is to be treated like a real sport, where winning and losing matter, then while it might suffice for an indie match or unimportant exhibition, wrestling shouldn't just be showing up and getting your shit in. No, for the world title, you should do your homework. It really draws you into the world of the promotion, or perhaps it simply brings the work into reality as it gains substance. This is already a very real product, and removing it, even more suspension of disbelief allows you to watch it as it is. No contradictions, no artifice. The presentation is dead serious, and we are expected to treat this as seriously, if not more so, than even other combat sports like boxing. The entrances are similarly grandiose, with the classic old-school fight production of superimposing the flag of each nation over each combatant's face as they try to look tough for the camera. They open with their striking stances, but it's immediately evident that Han has learned from their previous encounter, checking Tamura's left hand with the tie, neutralizing his cross in the same way that southpaws like Khalil Roundtree Jr., Magomed Ankalaev, and Izzy, whilst in that stance, have done in order to neutralize the lead hand of Alex Pereira. As a note, Jamal Hill was not smart enough to do this despite being a southpaw, because he's a bum. Han has adapted his striking to smother Tamura, and as soon as the Japanese prodigy shows him the left kick, he crashes in and forces a clinch. Tamura tries to buck the takedown, but the second verse is the same as the first, and the suplex of all suplexes is hit, undoubtedly making Akira Maeda somewhere kick someone in the penis as he is wont to do. The Wolf goes to work as soon as they hit the mat, intelligently pausing his assault in order to drag Tamura back into the center of the ring, as he will several times throughout the match. While Han was able to command the exchange of the first match with his double wrist lock, Tamura seeks to control with his straight armbar, taking mount or side control, then doing the spinning armbar setup that other catch guys like Minoru Suzuki or Demetrius Johnson love. The lefty has learned to bail on a submission before it's too late, and switches to a rear naked choke that forces Han to use his first rope break. Now back on his feet, Tamura continues the trend of evolution, knowing he can't rely solely on his power side kicks, and attacking the lanky legs of Han with a lead kick. It's then that both things truly get weird, in a fun way, as both men spaz out, Tamura trying to unload a flurry of strikes while avoiding the grasp of the Russian Wolf. But what finally wins him the exchange is diving on a low single leg takedown. the favorite attack of his later MMA opponent, Kazushi Sakuraba. Volk Han continues his trend of being far ahead of the curve in combat sports by employing a tactic known as octopus guard, a technique favored by athletes like Khabib on the rare occasions that he ends up on bottom, and a half guard tactic championed by Mexican ground karate specialist Craig Jones. It basically entails avoiding being smashed chest to chest in half guard by ducking out and around your opponent, allowing a back take or knee lever sweep. Han uses it to attack a disgusting leg lock I'm not even sure has a name other than holy fuck ow, and while he can't finish Tamura from the chain of leg attacks, it's something new he's brought to the second fight. Whereas Han put over his series of double wrist lock attacks as the ace up his sleeve in the first outing, Tamura's response is the armbar, and eventually a rope break is forced, putting Tamura up 2-0. It's thus the scariest side of Han is activated, what I can only describe as grumpy dad mode, as he starts walking down his opponent despite a barrage of strikes, no hint of urgency or emotion present. While it might be muted, it really is his version of fighting spirit, a stoic denial of the pain he's going through, true to his Russian character. His grim determination lets him continue to force tie-ups before an ill-advised guard pull by Tamura and a reversal forces the younger man to finally burn his first rope break. Breaks and signature holds are traded, but the momentum is firmly Tamura's after a thunderous kick to the stomach floors Han. His steady pressure with kicks seems to have Han out on his feet, but just then Tamura commits a fatal error, not pulling away his left kick fast enough and thus getting it caught for a knee bar that forces him to tap. Tamura looks crushed as he blames himself for the defeat, pressing his head to the mat in anguish as Han is declared the winner. Kiyoshi had fought nearly flawlessly in the second half, and yet one mistake was all Han needed to end his night. To stand a chance of beating him, he needs to evolve. Tamura spends the half a year in between matchups preparing for a third matchup with Han the only way a Japanese wrestler knows how, doing the White Boy Challenge. While taking losses like one to his murder dad Maeda's gonna Maeda, he dispatches two quite scary gaijin in Nikolai Zuyev and Tyrell Bezaste, building a sense that he's ready to take on the scariest white boy of all, even if he does drop a loss to Dutch behemoth Hans Nieschmann. Han actually beats Maeda, but drops a loss to Yoshihisa Yamamoto that feels like a letdown from the Lord of the Rings. Han is at the peak, and thus there's nowhere to go but down. But that being said, down from the top of maybe the best company in the world isn't exactly that bad. Tamura, however, is gaining momentum, and he's undeniably the best native talent in the promotion at this point. This match has production as grandiose, if not more, than their second outing, with the video packages and entrances truly making this feel like it is to decide the best in the world. If there's one thing Maeda learned from Inoki, it has to be presentation, and that of rings during this time is second to none. It's worth noting that while Tamura has been in great shape for the duration of the series up until now, he looks fucking swole for this one. He's been tempering his body like a sword, folding layers of steel by pumping iron. The match begins and Tamura tests the waters, acting more cautiously than previous encounters when employing his kicks, no doubt replaying the finish of the previous match in his head over and over again since. Han is surprisingly the one to walk him down, cutting the ring nicely until Tamura is forced to crash into him. And just like that, Tamura is flung into the ground by the Russian wolf. Tamura thrashes, but Han employs brute strength, deadlifting his opponent into an armbar that looks absolutely terrifying. Tamura's own move is used against him, and just like that, he has to burn the first rope break. Once back on the feet, we see that Han hasn't been sitting idly by either, noticeably improving his leg kick defense with checks and weaponizing his lanky-ass build with front push kicks, aka teeps, a favorite weapon of mine in my own striking, and something Eddie Kingston utilized great in his series with Bryan Danielson that was already detailed in the channel. Han hits a beautiful Sayanage, but quickly remembers a key flaw when adapting some judo throws to MMA that we've seen when someone attempts a headlock throw against the cage, that of giving up your back, as Tamura counters with a back take. Han tries to score with the Sakuraba-style Kimura he applied previously, but once again, going with a theme of learning, he bails on the position and switches to an armbar, burning Han's first rope break. Tamura gets too slow on firing off a kick and it's caught reminiscent of the previous bout, but he has just enough reaction time to counter, Han having to go full belly down to adjust the bite of the knee bar, but it's not enough, and the two of them twist and turn all the way to the ropes for a break. Han once again employs his superior expertise with the clinch by sprawling on a throw and taking the back, and even re-guards when Tamura reverses to hunt for the full guard Kimura. Not content with breaking his shoulder, he offers a straight arm lock as the answer to pulling the elbow in, another very real counter, the most recent example of which I can think of is the absolute stud Tom Aspinall arm locking Alexander Volkov. As if it wasn't previously apparent, both men want to score with a straight armbar. It seems to me that this is Han trying to reassert his dominance by beating his most vexing foe with Tamura's own best move, proving that the crown will stay in Dagestan. It's then that things rise to a chaotic crescendo, and the striking goes buck wild. Tamura unleashes a barrage of kicks, punting Han so hard he bounces off the ropes, then unleashing a before-unseen leaping head kick that topples the magician. Sayanagi turns to backtake once again, but on the other side, and an armbar is nearly hit, but Tamura bails yet again, clearly not liking his bite on the elbow. The momentum is clearly on the side of the Japanese striker, and he's overwhelming in a way he hasn't been up to this point. This is officially war, and Tamura keeps chopping down the tall Russian again and again, truly putting him in point trouble for the first time in a while in his ring's career. Taking a note from Sayama, Tamura even pulls the ghillie, but uses it to roll through and sweep into mount, evolving the strategy of those who stood before him. Seeing the writing on the wall, Han tries to go for his trademark double wrist lock, but ends up wrenching an armbar that puts Tamura into true pain, screaming out after the rope break. After a short grappling exchange, Han does something deeply uncharacteristic, unleashing a 1-2 combo that drops Tamura. Han plays to the crowd in a way that feels as goofy as it is dominant, and looking to finish off his foe, he rushes Tamura, who counters with a judo throw that's as explosive as it is technical. An armbar is locked in, and Han looks to counter as usual, but he's in the center of the ring, far from shore. He bucks and tries to roll, but there is no daylight. The impossible happens, and Han has tapped. Seemingly in jubilation, Tamura runs around like a kid who started summer break, leaving quickly to go celebrate. The crown has passed to Tamura, and the stoic Russian has seemingly been solved by the prodigy of rings. This has been a war between pro wrestling and Sambo, and the strongest sport has won. What I love about this series is the feeling of progression and evolution, not just of the two men, but what this means for combat sports overall. I've made note time and time again, to the point where it's probably annoying, how ahead of their time each man is, particularly in the case of Han, and that's for good reason. You get the sense, at least in my opinion, that if either of these guys showed up to UFC 1, they'd have beat the asses of both Hoist Gracie and Ken Shamrock, especially in the case of Han, whose Sambo style was a fucking premonition of what would come. After all, the first Sambo athlete to show up to one of those early tournaments won the whole thing, one Oleg Taktarov, the Russian bear, himself an ethnic minority in Russia, but a Mari Finno-Ugric tribesman. In other words, most if not all of these techniques are incredibly legitimate. Beyond it looking quote-unquote real, however, the storytelling is also brilliant, with the progression of each man coming in as if they had actually rewatched the previous fights and specifically trained for each one. Tamura learns counters for the double wrist lock arsenal of his foe, and Han makes great strides in his striking, getting more disciplined defensively whilst advancing his slightly silly stand-up game with front kicks and straight punches to complement his long frame. Both men are evolving as wrestlers and martial artists simultaneously throughout, studying their crafts. The legitimacy of each man would be seen as rings transitioned into a fully shoot promotion in the waning months of the 20th century. But more importantly than that, each had reached a truly amazing skill as professional wrestlers, with Han of course being notable due to having never trained it until the early 90s. Control has noted this before, but he's underrated as a storyteller, with a layered approach to how he sets up a match. Han rarely uses the same counter attack for a submission twice in one match, which presents a sense that he's one by one unloading every trick he has up his sleeve. The only way to truly defeat Han is to study every counter, learn every attack, and learn from it for the next bout instead of doing the same thing again. In other words, he's a fucking FromSoft boss. Han would go on to retire far too soon, with Tamura also doing the same, albeit some years later. Wrestling was worse off without them, but we still have the magic they were able to create in the ring. I doubt either of them will ever see this, but I thank each profusely. They each found beauty in violence and the human spirit in sport. If you enjoyed this video and haven't subscribed, please do so. If you deem my services worthy of financial support, then check out my Ko-fi linked in the description and on the channel page alongside the Discord server for this channel. This is Wrestling with the Narrative. I'm Squill, and Loki is still refusing my demands for single combat.